Which neighbor war turned into a lawsuit that made you fall to your knees before your attorney? Story 1. Neighbors stupidly caused themselves to be landlocked. Are we going to be legally required to share our private road? I own the land in pink. Our private road we use to access it is entirely on our land, surrounded by pink, denoted by our road. It has a locked gate, and the sides of our land that are against roads are fenced. We have remotes for it, or can open and close it from our house. The neighbor used to own the land in blue and purple, but sold the purple land to someone else a couple of weeks ago. They accessed their property by a gravel road on the purple land before, but the person who owns it now is planning on getting rid of that gravel road. Apparently, when they sold the land, they were assuming they could start using our private driveway instead. They didn't actually check with us first. They've effectively landlocked themselves. Ultimately, the neighbors want to use our road, denoted in gray, and make a gravel road from our road onto their property in blue that they still own. We have had some heated discussions about it, and things went downhill fast. They say that by not giving them access to our private road, we are infringing the rights of their property ownership. Now they are threatening to sue us. If they sue, is it likely that a judge would require us to let them use our road? Do we need to lawyer up? Thanks. Top relevant comment by Totterbiscuit. Going by general principles of easements and property transfers. When Blue severed his parcel into blue and purple, he should have reserved an easement across purple, who have no legal relationship with Blue and no duty to provide Blue with access. That Blue did not check with you for permission first is not your problem. An easement is a burden on title. A parcel of land carrying an easement is, at least in theory, reduced in value to some extent. Thus, a neighboring landowner with whom you have no legal relationship cannot impose a burden on your land. Something you do has to give rise to the easement. I cannot imagine your neighbor having any recourse against you whatsoever. If he were the purple guy and sold off the blue portion to a third party, that party could claim an easement by implication or by necessity against purple. Court assumes that the purchaser wouldn't have made the purchase without assuming he'd have access. It's a little different in Blue's case. He may or may not be able to claim an easement against purple. Against you, can't see it, don't worry about an attorney unless he sues you. If you decide to allow him access or reach some kind of settlement, make sure to use a written lease that shows that he has your permission to use the access. You want it in writing. He may have no intention of attempting to gain an easement by prescription, and your state's laws may not allow it under these conditions. But a writing is cheap to do and defeats any claim of easement by prescription. Prescriptive easement is when you are unaware of or ignore your neighbor using your land for a long period of time, such that he can later claim a right to use it indefinitely. Giving explicit permission to use the land defeats this, since it shows you were aware of and not ignoring your rights. Google MN easement by necessity and look at the top unsponsored link. I'd paste the link, but my browser is making it unintelligible. Anyway, it's a link to a PDF that appears to discuss easements in MN. I can't vouch for it since I'm not barred in MN, but it appears to cover the ground. Update 6 days later. I posted this last week. To make a long story short, my neighbors sold part of their land in a way that left them landlocked, because they assumed I would let them access their property via my road, which is gated and locked at all times. I got a lawyer and met with him. We hashed out a plan, and I was feeling pretty good about everything. Yesterday, Sunday, around noon, the purple landowners finished fencing in their property. My neighbors came home at about 3 p.m. and rang at the gate several times. I was advised by you guys as well as my lawyer to not let them in my gate even once, as that would set a precedent of them being allowed to use it. So I ignored the ringing. Eventually, the husband got out of the car and walked around to the other side of my property, which is not yet fenced in. He used that to get to my house and knocked on the door. I answered and told him I will not allow him to use my gate and to leave my property. He told me he wouldn't leave until I opened the gate so his wife could drive the car through. I said I would not do so and threatened to call the police. He walked left and went back to the car. Then they started ringing the gate again. I looked out the window, and they had a police officer with them. I went to the gate and informed the police officer that this is my property and I will not allow them to drive on it. I said that they have no legal right to access my property. Then I walked back to the house. After a couple of minutes, the police officer walked around to get onto my land and to the house and knocked at the door. He said that because their land is landlocked, I need to allow them to use my road until another solution can be figured out, and I can't just deny them access to their property. I called my lawyer, who spoke with the police officer on the phone. The police officer acknowledged that he cannot force me to let them drive on my property, but that he strongly encourages me to work this out with my neighbors in a civil manner. He left. The neighbors left their car in front of my gate, walked around to the unfenced part of my land, walked across my yard and onto their own property. I called my lawyer. We reported them for trespassing today. They left their car there until about 10 a.m. this morning. Tonight I was visited by the sheriff. He told me very short and sweet that I cannot deny my neighbors access to their property via an established road. He said, I better not get another call. From this point forward you will allow them to get to and from their property, and will not lock them out or in. Then he walked away. Called the lawyer. I am meeting with the lawyer in the morning. I am planning to ask her the following questions. Is there a point where I should give in to a police officer's request that I let them use my road? If they block my gate again, can I have their car towed? The way they parked it, I would not have been able to leave my property via the gate. They were parked on my land at the time, not on the public road. If anyone has any thoughts on these, I am all ears. Thank you. Some comments. Eliminate case. Thank you so much for keeping us updated. This case is fascinating to me. He told me very short and sweet that I cannot deny my neighbors access to their property via an established road. Your driveway is not an established road. However, if you start letting him use it, it will become an established road. You're going to have to be stubborn up against the cop. He's leading you in the wrong direction, and it could be detrimental to you. Ironically, the road he previously used on Purple Guy's property is an established road, and the cop should have been telling that guy he couldn't block his access. I actually pointed that out to the cop. He said that it's different, because to use Purple's road they would have to ask Purple to take down their fence and secure their animals out of the car's path. Fences aren't intended to come down to let cars pass, but gates are intended to open to let cars pass. Eliminate case, you may want to consider putting up a fence. If it works for Purple, it'll work for you. My lawyer said that we might consider it in the future but not to do it right now. She said that while Purple had documented plans to use the land in such a way that necessitated a fence, it will be obvious that my recent fence being put up is in light of this whole issue, and that a court might frown upon me making those kinds of changes in the middle of a dispute. Deleted. Why if you get a goat? Then you could get a fence and say it's because you need to protect your goat. And you'd have a goat. Note, I think he meant what if. Some following comments are goat jokes. I do recommend, we have special needs kids. Those are even better than goats for that justification. In seriousness, they are the biggest reason this is an issue for me. My kids deserve a safe and secure environment. I do not trust the neighbors or their guests to maintain a safe, secure environment for my kids. Third and final update. About 15 months later on April 4, 2016, I posted here for advice a while back and received some excellent, some funny, and some conflicting advice from all of you. The overwhelming advice was to get a lawyer, which I did. I explained the situation and that I had posted here, as well as the many topics you all prompted me to read up on, which was very helpful. While my lawyer seemed pleased with your advice to me, he also urged me to immediately stop publicly posting about the situation, which I did, and which I see from my many messages has disappointed all of you. First things first, everything worked out in my favor. My wife was upset by the entire situation and especially concerned with our children, and she got involved as well. She spoke with some friends who were able to get her in touch with the local city council. They could not explicitly do anything direct to help us, but did get us in touch with some of the right people to discuss our situation. One of the most important results from those connections was learning that the sheriff, who we spoke to, was actually a deputy who was acting on the sheriff's behalf. We were able to meet with the actual sheriff. He did agree that we should be more open to compromise, but was much more willing to admit that we had no immediate legal reason to do so, and no interest in forcing us to. My lawyer made a key point of the fact, I use the term loosely, that if the neighbors require an easement to access their land, they should do so with the land they sold, and not with unrelated land. After a lot of back and forth, but no court proceedings, luckily, with the other party, their attention was refocused on the buyer of their land. Funny enough, it's a small world, and I ended up meeting the buyer who was in my lawyer's office for a consultation with one of his partners. He ended up needing to get a different lawyer, since I already had a lawyer from the firm as I understand it, but we did keep in contact to some extent. Now, some speculation. We believe that the reason the neighbors didn't bother us for a while was their finances. Their lawyer was happy to keep pushing as long as he was getting paid, but when money ran dry he lost interest, due, we believe, to those financial problems as well as their inability to find a quick solution. The neighbors ultimately moved into town and lived with family there for several months. The neighbor on the other side gave them one-time access with a moving truck. Their lawyer had been showing up with them but was gone at that time, which is another reason I suspect major money issues. In the fall, the situation picked up again, with contact from a new lawyer this time. This new lawyer requested a meeting with us, and our lawyer, of course. He requested that we consider buying their property to resolve the issue. We initially said no. They offered it to the owner on the other side. They said no. They sweetened the pot. Eventually the price was right, and my wife and I had developed an interest in more land. We discussed terms, then decided against it. They went a little cheaper again. We purchased their land. I nearly posted an update once the purchase was complete, but there was an additional interesting detail that came out of the woodwork and brought new legal questions. The neighbors had used their land and home as collateral for an informal loan, and the person who lent to them wanted the property when they failed to repay him. He came after us. The outcome of this was that they are the ones who failed their end of the contract, so his problem was with the neighbors, not with us. This is definitely a sideline from the original situation, but caused a delay in my ability to update. As of today, my wife and I are out a substantial amount of money due to legal fees, which it turned out was not worth going after from the neighbors. There is also bad news in that the home on that property was essentially worth even less than we thought, and there were major issues beyond the land itself: septic tank failure, leaking oil tank. Those expenses were slightly mitigated by insurance, but we are out a good sum. We also had a hard time combining the plots, which was legally desirable, to build anything that straddled the two property lines. However, the plots are now combined into one large plot. The good is that the neighbors are no longer an issue for us, and by this summer, their property should be in good shape to use for a new project of our own. On one hand, I will say this: the little chunk of land was definitely not worth the time and stress involved in this process, nor the money. However, the outcome was positive for our family, for which there is no dollar value, and it's all over with now. My sincere thanks to everyone who offered advice. There are far too many of you to thank individually, but please know that I appreciated everyone's contributions, and I hope you're all still around to read my much-delayed resolution. Story 2 now. That story is very recent, and the told you so effect is never as sweet as this was. I moved into an apartment with a roommate last summer. When we first came in, the biggest part of the sale was the fact that the apartment was freshly renovated and soundproof. This one is important, and you'll see why. So when we got in, my roommate immediately fell in love with it, and I was too. When we moved in, we were very careful not to bother anyone, as we wanted to quickly have a good relationship with our neighbors. Oh, did you see the new neighbors? They only move during the day. They don't make sound during the night. What nice people, kind of deal. And we can safely say it worked. What we did not know, however, is that we were only 3 renters when we first came in. Us on the floor, another family upstairs on the opposite side, and another one on the 3rd floor, with one empty apartment between us. Turns out the soundproof statement was accurate, but only in regards to the inside to outside situation. When our upstairs neighbors moved in, it was a nightmare. Sound from 5 a.m. to past midnight, 5 days in a row, dropping stuff, speaking loudly, yelling, or walking in their apartment with shoes on. Out of frustration on the 5th day, I walked upstairs and met my neighbor at midnight. I asked them to cease their activities for the night. I have work in the morning, and I cannot be kept up all night. I understand they were freshly moved in, and they might have had a tight schedule, but midnight was too late to be moving stuff. He didn't reply and closed the door on me. I went downstairs, and the sound started over again. I notified my landlord, and he told me he'd handle it and apologized for the situation, explaining to me my neighbor was just moving and that he probably didn't understand what I was saying because of a language barrier. The neighbors were extremely loud. I know a lot of people use that as an excuse to unfairly criticize their neighbors, but when I say loud, I mean it. There was no stop to their loud noises. It seemed like they couldn't be bothered to hold something without dropping it, or jumping up and down on the floor, or purposefully banging the bed frame against the wall during intimate moments. I recorded the events, and even installed microphones in my home connected to my computer, activating and recording every time there were strong vibrations in the house. Over 98 events on Monday, February 14th. I was livid. I sent that to the landlord and explained this cannot continue. First, the apartment was poorly soundproofed, which meant we were hearing every sound at all times. Second, we had notified the neighbors about the situation, and they ignored it. I had notified the landlord to awaken him to our situation. I reported the issues several times, and even advised my landlord that there were very heavy-sounding thuds coming from upstairs, which worried me. He answered with, "Stop complaining about your neighbors already." "I have other things to do," I answered. "Understood, sir. Please be advised this will be my last communication and action to help you in that regard. You know when I said I heard loud bangs? Turns out our upstairs neighbor was doing bench press lifting in his living room, and the heavy thuds I kept hearing were him dropping his weights on the ground. I had warned my roommate about removing anything she didn't want broken from the living room, and lo and behold, 4 days later the first crack appeared. Then another. The floor was giving up. I moved the couch out of the way and moved the TV and consoles into the bedroom. Fast forward to 3 days ago. After another series of loud bangs, I heard a loud crack followed by an "oh no," followed by very loud noises. I went to the living room to see my neighbor on the ground with several actually gruesome injuries due to the fact he just went through the floor and brought his bench and weight rack with him. I called an ambulance and the police. The police asked me if I reported the issue with my landlord, which I could confirm, due to my communications being made via email. I sent everything, and I am now, of course, filing to break my lease due to an uninhabitable dwelling. The landlord came in yesterday and just exploded. Told me I should have made him aware that my neighbor was doing dangerous things, to which I answered I had notified him about the very loud sounds, and he never investigated, and that he also ordered me to stop complaining about my neighbors. It was not my responsibility to go out of my way to protect his assets if he is unwilling to cooperate with me. My neighbors, roommate, and I are now residing in a hotel until we can find a new place to live. We are now also looking toward adding a bit more pressure by maybe filing for criminal negligence against both our landlord and the neighbor. The first because the apartment was apparently having some flaws, and the latter for endangering us. Had I not caught on to what caused the sound earlier, me or, heaven forbid, my roommate could have been under that. Anyway, it was a fun week. And I do enjoy the accommodations of my hotel. Never went to a 4-star spa-included hotel before. Turns out the chocolate on the pillow is a lie, and I am very disappointed about that TLDR. My neighbor was a noisy person who went through the floor with his weightlifting equipment, and my landlord ignored me when I complained about the noise. Edit. As I have advised to a few commenters, I followed up with my roommate, and she did not take pictures of the event. She got a bit mad, I asked, considering what just happened, and questioned my priorities. I then explained that our Reddit story got a lot of attention, and some people in the comments requested some visual proof. I will spare you her answer. I will just add that it's okay not to believe the story based on my word alone. If people actually didn't question it, I would be worried. When I posted this story, my only intent was to share my experience, and I thought, malicious compliance, neat. If there was a horrible landlord or bad neighbor Reddit I would have found prior to submitting this story, I probably would have gone there instead. I will also add that I am not an expert or an engineer. How and why something like weights and the like would cause part of the floor to collapse, I cannot say. Was there structural damage prior? Was there water damage that was never addressed, just covered up? Was the structure just not as sound as I believed it was when I got in? I cannot say. I understand some of you might have worked in construction and never have experienced such an event or have actual reasons to suspect a lie due to personal and professional experience. Once again, you can and should question anything on the internet. I just hope you also apply that kind of skepticism, and I mean wanting proof or the opinion of an actual expert prior to making a decision, to more than just Reddit posts. For those who made us laugh, and those who have spoken to us, who have been encouraging and constructive, people who actually gave us advice, I thank you very much. It was very nice of everyone, and I wish you the best. Update: my brother has agreed to take the case and look at the options. We are not feeling very vindictive, and our insurance is going to cover most of the costs, so we might file for negligence. I'm not a lawyer myself. I don't know the terms in English, but basically the landlord should have had his building inspected before renting, which was apparently not done. The landlord has apparently calmed down after the events and has apologized for everything. He has scheduled a visit from an inspector to check the integrity of the apartment and the cause of the damage that would have allowed a human and exercise equipment to go through the floor and ceiling. In exchange for not pressing charges, he has agreed to reimburse all the money we have invested into the rent, our stay at the hotel, and a little extra as an apology, and the guarantee to either repair the apartment and soundproof it properly, or, if it is not an option to go back, he will relocate us to another of his buildings, which are a lot better than what we had, reduce our rent quite significantly for as long as we stay, with papers to back his offer up, and a full year of free rent. This is actually quite generous in the current rent market. I'm leaving the final say to my roommate. On my end, I was not injured, she was not, and this could have been just a freak accident. Yes, the landlord is a bit of a jerk, but let's be honest, we all had worse, landlord-wise. Plus, even if we take him up on his offers, the upstairs neighbor might be looking for some severe compensation. He did get injured, after all. But we would be happy to hear about your opinion. What would you say? Take this further or just take the refund plus the free year and then low rent for the years to come. Last update, April 9th. After a long time deciding what to do, we have opted to take the landlord's offer. However, we made it clear that we could not live under the same people if the soundproofing was not, at the very least, improved. We went to my brother's office and met with a colleague of his who drafted multiple documents for us to sign. One of them was for the promise of low rent. The landlord wanted to offer $250 off the market price. We negotiated it up to $300 to be applied on all our leases. We have also agreed to the reimbursement of 6 months of rent, which will cover us for the next year and then some plus the free year. We received about $1 each, and the landlord has agreed to cover all the costs of the hotel we and our parents had to pay. We might be moving back into our apartment by the end of the month. It's a bit disappointing, as we kind of wanted to try another place, but from what I understand, there is a very good chance our neighbors are not moving back on their end, so it might just be back to the ideal scenario. There will be very heavy renovation done, and a thorough inspection of the structure before we move back in. Comment from Op. I just want to thank everyone for their kind words, their jokes, their encouragements. They have very much helped both of us, and got us to smile a bit more. For the others, I do not wish anything less. I just hope you are doing well, that you are safe. I appreciate the effort of those who were still able to voice their disbelief while being respectful, and for the others, well, you know. It's the internet. What are we going to do? Story 3 neighbor's child has disabilities and won't stop climbing the fence, entering my house, and freeing my dogs for the past 7 months after moving into my new house with my daughter and dogs. The neighbor's child, who is about 15 or 16 years old and has pretty severe Down syndrome, has increasingly been entering my property and home. At first, I just talked to the neighbors, and they were at first really sorry and vowed to monitor her more while she's in their backyard. However, after a few months, they just genuinely do not care anymore, and brush it off. I've installed security cameras in the backyard and front yard purely for my own safety, insurance-wise, because we do have a pool. She will climb the fence into my yard, a 6-foot wooden privacy fence, with a ladder from their shed, and let my dogs out. I fixed her letting my dogs free, as she says, by using chains and padlocks on the 2 gates. Before this became a common occurrence, she even would let the dogs out of the house and then free them. Numerous times, if my garage door is open, she will leave their backyard and just walk into my house to free my dogs. I don't know what the purpose is, other than it's something she just has to do for whatever reason when she climbs into the backyard, sometimes when I'm not even home, and she cannot get back out. She begins screaming and crying and just shuts down. Before I started chaining and locking my gates because of her releasing my dogs, her parents would just walk in and get her and leave. Now, since I've chained it, they start a huge fit about me having her locked in my backyard, and they have to climb the fence, bring the ladder over, and carry her back over. Somehow this is my fault. Now, I'm not really blaming her because she mentally doesn't know any better. She has some very severe issues, and she's lucky my dogs are super nice. A purebred German Shepherd, an English Bulldog, and a mixed Shepherd Bulldog. I just honestly worry about her safety in the backyard, climbing fences, and her seemingly not being watched as she needs to be. I have a pool, and if she falls in when I'm not home, she could very well drown. That's why I installed security cameras to cover myself, if that ever happens. I truly hope it never does, but it seems her parents just put her in the backyard and that's it. I've called the local Child and Family Services office several times in the past 2 months to report it because I feel she is at risk with her parents' inattentiveness and their seemingly uncaring attitude about her just going into people's yards, garages, houses, and so on. I have a full garage of power tools, table saws, and other equipment that I've now had to resort to flipping the breaker off when I open the doors out of fear she may severely injure herself. I feel like I've done everything I can, talked to the parents numerous times, called Child and Family Services, installed cameras, locked my gates further. I just have no idea what to do now. I've debated calling the police when she enters, but I don't know how that will escalate. Updating sad about this update for the kid. I took the majority of the given advice and called the police non-emergency number and asked for an officer to come out because I had questions about an issue I'm having and briefly explained it. An officer showed up. I invited him in and explained the whole situation. He wasn't really sure what to do about it right away, so he asked for a supervisor to come to his position. The supervisor showed up, and I went over the whole thing again. We went upstairs to my computer where I have all the videos clipped and saved. 9 times of her entering the backyard and 4 of her entering the house through the garage. We watched each one, and he got on his cell phone and went back to his car. A few minutes later, he came back with 3 flash drives and asked me to copy the videos over to the drives, and had me fill out a piece of paper stating what I put on the drives and then signed it. I repeated it all 3 times. About 45 minutes later, after we had been talking and he'd been on and off his cell phone the entire time, 2 Child Protective Services workers showed up and reviewed the videos again. They took a complete statement from me, going back to the first time it happened. This took about 2 hours because they wanted it to be precise and as accurate as I remembered it, and they left out anything I wasn't 100% sure on. The officers and Child Protective Services workers then headed next door to talk to the parents. The parents apparently shut the door in their faces and said they didn't want to talk, but because of my statement and the videos of her climbing over, getting stuck, having to be carried back over, and entering the house even when I wasn't home, they had probable cause to enter the home anyway. After they were inside their house for about 10 to 15 minutes, another police car showed up, followed by another a few minutes later. I was in my garage, so I don't know exactly what happened inside, but after more officers showed up, the father was put in the back of a police car, and the daughter was placed into the Child Protective Services workers' van, and they left. The father was driven away about 10 minutes after that. Then, about an hour later, the mother was also put into the back of a police car, and they drove away. I talked to the initial officer who showed up and asked for a supervisor, and he told me they found substances, pills not in prescription bottles or not prescribed to them, and that the home was just not being taken care of inside and definitely not a safe environment for a child. He said they found substances unsecured and in areas the child had access to. I haven't seen them since the day after the post. I feel bad for the kid being in that situation, and me being a neighbor, not even knowing. My hesitation to call the police sooner weighed on me. I didn't think it was anything like they found. I just figured it's really tough raising a child, and adding severe mental disabilities makes it even tougher. I should have called earlier once the reports to Child Protective Services weren't resulting in action. Story 4. Am I the bad person for not letting my neighbors use my yard? A 26-year-old female recently bought a house with my husband. Our house is a beachfront house with an amazing yard. The backyard is designed to basically look like a hidden oasis. It has a pool, hot tub, water fountains on the side, and a small slide, all surrounded by trees and other plants. The trees give us privacy from both houses next to us, but still give us the view of the beach. The backyard is why we bought the home, and we already spend the majority of our time being back there, even when my husband works. The entire backside of the house is mostly glass, so it's also what we see when we are in the house. It is definitely the focal point of our home. Yesterday, we started the construction on a new fence. This fence goes around the backyard with a gate only to the beach, so you either have to go through the house or go through the beach to get to our backyard. We didn't think anything of it before I got a knock on my door this morning from someone who lives in the condos across the street from us. I have seen her a few times, but we never really talked. She introduced herself and then asked about what we were building in our yard. I just told her that we wanted to put up a fence before tourists start coming. This was recommended to us by our realtor. Marie kind of looked shocked and asked if we were putting a gate on the front or anything. I said no, and that we already had a landscaper come and look to get more plants put around it. She then asked me if I could put a gate on the front. I didn't really understand this, so I asked her to clarify when she explained that the previous owners would let people from the condo walk through their yard to get to the beach, because otherwise they have to walk 5 minutes down the street to get onto the beach where there are a lot of tourists. Our street leads to a private beach, so there aren't as many people. She said that mostly everyone in the condo started doing this over the past few years, especially people with kids, or even just letting their kids go to the beach alone. She also said that they would let people use their pool if they texted and asked. I immediately told her that no one would be in my yard unless I knew them. She obviously got upset by this, and then said that basically everyone in the condos would be upset by this. I told her that I understand why they want to use my yard, and that it's just to pass through, but I hate the idea of being in my backyard and having random people walk through. She started getting mad at me for it, and saying that I am ruining a lot of people's way of life by blocking off this path. She claimed that a lot of people let their kids during the summer go to the beach through this way, and a lot of kids can't walk to the popular spots. The beach is kind of quiet where we are. I did get annoyed and told her that I don't really care and that I will not let people into my yard. She tried to bring up the pool, but I just told her that I wasn't going to talk about it anymore. This was yesterday afternoon, and I've already seen people standing outside the condos and pointing to my house. I even had someone run over to talk to me and ask if I was really gating off the beach path. I've talked to both my neighbors, who agree with me, but my friend and sister are both saying I'm in the wrong. So, am I the bad person? Relevant comments. Additional info. Groundbreaking 201. I'm a bit confused. Do these condo owners have access to this private beach? If so, it's on their landowner or manager to provide that. If not, then they really have no argument regardless either way. Easy decision. You're not the bad person. Private property is private property, plain and simple. It is not technically a private beach. There just isn't a public entrance unless they walk down the street. Vandriesen, you're not the bad person. If anything happens to these people on your property, you are liable. Who cares what happened in the past? The previous owners aren't the owners anymore. You are. Like the saying goes, your house, your rules. You also don't want people littering or destroying your yard. They have to walk 5 minutes, oh well. Your friend and your sister don't own your property. Tame_iguana1. What exactly did your friend and sister say which would make you in the wrong? If this ain't bait, my sister feels like it's a rich person issue and that they're not hurting anyone. My friend feels like anyone should have access to the beach, and it's rude to make parents with kids walk down during the summer update. March 27th. I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for their suggestions. I did want to cover a few things. I do have a fence around my pool area. This is just to protect my yard. Secondly, we have indoor and outdoor cameras all around our house. Some are visible and some are hidden. We do already have a sign up that says we are recording. The fence will also be finished by tomorrow afternoon, so it shouldn't be too long for us to have it up. I also called our local police, and they said that the condo residents do not have a right to use private property to access the beach, so everything is clear for me to move forward with. The previous owners had the house for 10 years and only let people use it for the past 3 years, so it's not long enough for any legal action to force me to give up my yard, per our lawyer. I called my realtor this morning, and the owners called me after she talked to them and explained a lot about the situation. They told me that they only used the house as a vacation home, and so they did let people cross during the summer, but when they were there, they put up a sign telling people not to use the path. They said that they didn't let people do it at first, but when they weren't home, people did it anyway. They also allowed certain people to use their pool only when they were in it themselves. It was never a free-for-all pool, and they even put the cover on it before leaving. The previous owners did also say that it was smart to put up a fence and recommended calling the condo manager. When I did call the condo manager, they asked if we could find a middle ground, because they know that a lot of residents use my yard and kind of made it sound like they told residents that they could use this path. My neighbor thinks that they used it as a selling point because there were times where they would point towards our house specifically, while people were looking at condos. Either way, my husband is having our lawyer send the condo a letter stating that no residents are allowed in our yard for any reason so that we have legal writing with them. So basically, people have used our yard in the past, but my husband and I aren't allowing it. I get them using it if we had it as a vacation home, but we are living in it year-round, so that changes everything. A lot of my neighbors who live in the houses have messaged me and said that they're really happy I'm cutting off the path, so I feel like it's the right move. I have already put up no trespassing and no beach access signs and had permanent ones made for the front of our yard and on the fences. I also am putting up a privacy fence in the front and adding trees right in front of it, so it's harder for people to jump it. We are also connecting our gate right to our neighbors, so that there isn't a spot on the side that they can try and squeeze through. Either way, I am going to cut off the path, and I kind of don't care if they hate me for it. Thank you to everyone for your suggestions.